All right, let's have this conversation. Now, the SABC appointed Nomsa Chabeli, remember, as its new Group CEO. Now, before joining SABC, Chabeli was actually at MTN, Massmart, Supersport, among others. It's been a little over 2 months now since she joined. So let's take stock and find out how she's had her time here at the SABC and what are impressions of the company. Thank you so much for joining us here on the show. It's just been just a little over 2 months. You're going for 3 months now. How has it been?
It's been quite busy. I think, SABC is quite a massive organization. If you remember that we've got offices in every region.
Yeah.
And one of the key things that we've been trying to do is reach out to as many regions as possible. It's in this period that I've been here, we've managed to draft and get our corporate plan approved by the board. That's a corporate plan and the strategy. So it's been quite a lot of grafting, late nights, weekends, but I've got a brilliant team of ExCo members that have been very involved all the way. So, and then I think one of the key things is obviously to get to know the employees better. It's been a listening tour more than anything, trying to understand what the key issues are and just trying to, to make it clear to myself what the future looks like.
And from an employee's perspective, from your own interactions with some of them, what would you say were your big takeaways?
My big takeaways is that employees at SABC need to be inspired. They need to go back to being inspired. They're very committed to actually delivering on the public mandate. They understand the commercial imperatives of the SABC. And the fact that they're here and they wake up every day and are committed to this organization is something that needs to be, acknowledged. And they understand that in order for SABC to be financially sustainable and viable for the future, it means that we must think things differently, So for me, that's the good news, is that you find employees, even though there's been a lot that has happened, in the last couple of years, but there is still this great understanding about the role of the SABC in our democracy and the fact that they are the people behind delivering on what the SABC's role is. And
I want us to talk about the role of the SABC just a little later on, especially in the context now leading up to the elections and how critical the SABC becomes of a voice. But let's stay with something you said around your corporate plan as well as the strategy. What would you say for you are the big key priorities as you now start with your turn? I mean, you've done your roadshow with the employees, you've spoken to them. I'm sure the conversations continue, but what become your priorities now?
The number one thing for me is basically people capability. I think it's important that we reinforce that capability, we build the capacity for SABC, because the people are the ones that are going to deliver the corporate strategy and the corporate plan. So that's very critical. We've looked at what we call 5 key, talent groups that we're going to be looking at, and we know that we work in a very contested space. The media landscape has changed, with the advent of digitalization, digital transformation. It's a place where really talent is very, very key. So we have to be able to attract the right talent. We have to be able to retain the talent. And also we have to be able to train the existing talent to ensure that they're future fit, because we can't leave them behind. So that's critical. They sit with a lot of IP and we need to respect that. And these are people who've been very important to get us where we are. The second thing is the financial sustainability of the organization. It's not it's a well-storied issue that the SABC is struggling financially and we've got liquidity issues. So just stabilizing of the organization when it comes to the finances is very, very critical. The third one is really looking at our content. The reality is the right content, you get the right audiences that translate to advertising revenue. And so that's critical. So that ecosystem has to be orchestrated so well. So that's one of the key things that one is to look at. And the important one is that digital transformation, which really talks to SABC Plus's role going forward, which is so critical. Because as we're saying, this is a contested space. But what's more interesting is that the audiences have changed. And the audiences, they are no longer just watching linear TV, just listen to radio. It's a multi-platform world. And SABC, with the scale that we have, here's an opportunity for us to really leverage that and build ourselves for the future.
Speaking about financial sustainability, I mean, last year we were being told that approximately 1.4 billion rand in losses for the 2022-23 financial year end. Where are we in terms of that particular figure? Is it worse off, or are we making strides towards bringing it down?
So we are recovering. That's the good news. We are not where we should be. And we don't have a golden solution at the moment. I think it's important for me to say that. It's going to take a lot of hard work. But the good news is that we have a management, we have a board that is very committed to actually getting us out of that morass. So where are we at the moment? The good news is that it's not a 1.2 billion rand hole that we're facing, it's half of that. So we forecast that once we finalize the full year 2024, we will look at a revenue loss of about 590 million rand, which is far more better, but it's not where we want to be. And I think it's also imperative for me to say, even in the next year, we forecast a full year loss of just above 250 million rand. But I think what you're seeing here, you're seeing a trajectory, you're seeing us clawing back, you're seeing us really bringing in new revenue streams. So our budget at the moment, we admit that it's very risky because it really means that we need to grow our advertising revenue, we need to look at other revenue streams, we really need to think differently. So a lot of innovation is required from us in order for us to be able to really leverage our scale and be able to go out there and compete accordingly.
But when you think about the fact that, I mean, SABC, when it comes to its news delivery, when it comes to its content, when it comes to being watched, we're still the most watched. So what are you finding are the reasons why then we are not able to attract enough advertisers to be able then to up our advertising revenue?
You know, one of the key things that we're looking at is, in a way, one of the key things that we'll be doing is building the capability when it comes to our sales teams. Because that's a very competitive area. And when I say capability, it's the entire ecosystem. So we need to ensure that we've got the right insights. We have deep consumer insights, that we are seen as business partners to advertisers, not just as people who bring a rate card and say for 30 seconds, this is the amount of money it costs. So we need to be seen as business solution providers. So we need to reposition ourselves on that side. And I think the second one...
Before you move on, pardon me, do we have the right people, though, for that particular job there?
So we need to remember that we went through a period of that Section 189. So we did lose quite good people, that we need to admit. So we do have a sales force currently. However, it's important that we actually capacitate them, you know, give them the right tools to be able to go and sell. Ensure that our trade marketing is as competitive as the trade marketing of any other broadcaster in South Africa, because the reality is that we are competing in a global world. We shouldn't just think we're in South Africa and therefore we just look at ourselves. So it's very critical. So we do have the salespeople, but we must capacitate them. We must inspire them. We must give them the tools for them to be able to sell competitively. And then also we must look at our revenue management strategies, because that's important, right? It's not left up to them to do that. So it means that the commercial engine of SABC has to work, and it has to be far more innovative in terms of building the revenue models and coming up with the pricing strategies that we currently have, because currently our pricing strategies are very archaic, they're very traditional, and therefore other people are eating our lunch. So that's one of the key things that we need to do.
So when does that happen? Because, you know, all of it is good in paper, and SABC employees, for example, would say, we've heard this before. We've heard people come to say that the strategies to try and improve this particular institution. I'm sure members of the public as well are sitting saying all these plans are well and good, but when do they come into implementation, particularly on the sales front?
So we've started. We've literally started. So we are busy with the sales model at the moment. We've got, you know, internal subject matter experts, external subject matter experts, where we've sat around, we're really building that sales model, and we are ensuring that we are co-creating it with our employees, because what we don't want to do is enforce something on them that they don't understand. So they need to be part of that co-creation and input into it and own it. So that ownership is very critical to us. So I'm not just talking the to-be state, I'm saying as is. That's what we're busy with, because the financial year has started. Yep. The 1st of April has come. So we don't have the time. So there's an urgency to what I'm talking about. So it's not the type of thing where we say in 6 months, in 9 months. It is now, it's urgent, and we are busy with it.
There's another issue, though, especially when you think about the financial aspect of the SABC. There's the issue of the payment of some of the supplies. The issue of Centec is a huge one as well. And I wonder, how are we tackling that particular issue? Because it's been described as a ticking time bomb and the threats of a possibility of a blackout. So what's happening there?
Centec is a critical partner to the SABC, and you'll see that in the strategy we've got 8 pillars, and one of the pillars there is partnerships. So Centec is very critical to us, and we have been in discussions with them where we are talking about payment plans. So it's very important for me to say that it's something that the SABC is really prioritizing, because signal distribution is critical to us. Without signal, it's black on air. So yes, we do have those challenges, but currently you'll realize that we used to pay Centec at some point 15 million rand, it went up to 25, but we've increased our payments to Centec. We've put together a strategy that's really going to ensure that there is no risk when it comes to the elections, because that's critical to us.
How much do we owe them now?
So at the moment, the bill to Centec, and remember this bill is not in the current financial year, it's the last 3 financial years. It's important for me to point that out. The bill owed to Centec is 915 million rand.
So the threats of a blackout then, and I know you're saying that there's work to try and avert that possibly, but should we find ourselves in a situation where these particular plans then don't come in place, is there a contingency measure that could possibly be there in order to ensure that we go to an election and we're able to take our viewers through it?
So it's important for us to risk manage. So that's what we're busy doing. One can't say this is the only plan that I've got. You must look at the different probabilities, and decide, which one is the best. And it's important for us. So we've done that. So it's not like we're relying on one plan. We've looked at it because the elections are far too critical for us to leave them to chance. And hence the importance of our discussions with Centec. Centec is very committed to South Africa. It's very committed to our public interest mandate. And I think that's a good thing, that we do understand with Centec that we've got a symbiotic relationship. We must remember that SABC is the biggest customer to Centec. Nearly 80% of our revenue, their revenue, comes from us. So there's that understanding as well. So both organizations report to one minister. So the minister has been very involved in trying to gain consensus, in trying to negotiate between the two bodies to ensure that no matter what happens, we don't get to a situation where there is black on air. So that's something that has been worked on, and that's something that we are committed to.
It's one supplier. If we're struggling with one, how are we doing with the other suppliers?
So that's the biggest debt. The biggest debt is Centec. The other suppliers, we've got payment plans with them. So they're not at the same level as Centec, because we must remember, SABC's cost structure, we've got fixed costs, right? So the biggest cost to SABC is our wage bill, followed by a content bill, and then followed by a signal distribution, bill. So those 3 are the most critical one, and they make up nearly 80% of our cost structure. So therefore, we have to be fiscally responsible, and therefore we have to balance that. And I think I must say that we must pass our appreciation to what Centec has done in terms of understanding the challenges that we were going through and ensuring that we were still able to deliver on our public mandate.
Speaking about the wage bill, then, if we are to look at, the challenges that we're currently facing as the SABC, especially when it comes to finances, are the staff salaries at risk?
When you have liquidity issues, everything is at risk. It's not just staff salaries, it's your ability to actually compete for local content, which is very critical. It's your ability to be able to pay for your signal distribution. So I think what we need to look at is that we've been very stable at prioritizing and ensuring that our wages are settled month in, month out. We haven't had that challenge. And it's something that we are committed to, because we believe that SABC employees are the engine of this organization. Without them, we don't have an SABC. So as I sit here right now, like I'm saying, everything is at risk. But with our stability plan, we don't foresee a situation where we are unable to pay salaries. However, it's important for us to point out that in the same vein, it means that we have to be very measured when it comes, for example, to wage negotiations, etc., because we know the challenges that we are facing.
And I was going to ask you about that, because the union's quite unhappy, and we also saw a bit of a picket at lunchtime. What's the latest in there, because you were not finding each other?
So I think, it's important for me to point out that SABC offered, the bargaining unit a 6% increase. That was effective on the 1st of October 2023. And as we sit here right now, SABC's got 2 unions. We've got BEMAU, you've got CWU. Yeah. BEMAU, which is the larger of the 2 unions, signed and accepted the 6% increase. And then the CWU issue is not about the quantum of the increase. It's about the backdating of that increase to the 1st of April. So what we are saying as SABC is that we understand the plight of our workers. We don't have our heads in the sand. It's important. We understand the cost of living in South Africa. We understand what has happened, especially during COVID, and how people are really struggling to survive. However, I think it's us trying to balance and ensuring that we're a going concern. So, trying to balance all these different, tensions that we've got in the organization. So where we are at the moment with the unions, we are still in discussions. We're trying to find consensus and trying to understand each other. But what we have offered is that we're on a journey of really renewing SABC and ensuring that we are fit for purpose for the future. We have said that let us meet again in September of 2024, where we will look at the performance of SABC since the 1st of April. And if it so happens, which we really are committed to doing, that our financial situation is positive, then we can discuss the issue of the backdating. But in our current financial position, we are unable to commit to that because we have to be responsible.
And we have to go for a break, but just before we go, let's wrap up then this issue because, do you think you'll be able to find one another? Because looking at some of their social media posts, for example, during that particular picket, they were very much stressful about this issue of the backdating. And for them, they say that this is top of mind, it's for their members. And if things need to get to, a level of a strike, for example, is the SABC even prepared for that, given the amount of work that we have towards an election, if you're not finding one another on this issue?
As I said earlier, we have to prepare for all probabilities. We are hopeful that we will find one another. We, as management, as the board of the SABC, we don't want to see a strike at SABC because we do believe that the employees of SABC are very critical to this organization. And we are hopeful that with the interventions that are currently in place, we will be able to find one another.
All right. After the break, I'd like us to talk about, the SABC as well as its mandate and towards the elections. How are things looking? Are we ready to deliver, especially given the fact that, we're broadcasting in different languages. That in itself is a mammoth task. But I'd like us to talk about this after the break. Our conversation continues in a moment. Thanks for staying with us. Let's continue then our conversation with our Group CEO, Nomsa Chabeli, who's joining us in studio. We were talking about, a lot to do with revenue and the financial viability of the SABC, but there's, of course, the mandate that the SABC has to deliver on, and that is around the elections. And you think about the fact that this mammoth task that lies ahead right now, is it all systems go?
It's all systems go. We've been working on this election plan for a very long time. I think that's good. We are really the right-hand partner for the IEC when it comes to elections. We have a storied history with covering elections, and we've been very successful at covering elections. And this one is no different. And we do believe, if you listen to the IEC earlier today about the amount of people who've registered to vote, you realize that this is a very big election. And we are the only broadcaster in South Africa that will really be offering wall-to-wall coverage of this election in all our languages, including SAN and sign language. So, we must remember that we have, we are on the ground in all the different provinces, and we've really got a strategic plan that we've put together in terms of just current affairs programming and news programming. And we need to remember that at SABC, we have an average of 26.4 million people who tune in every day to listen to, on our contents, on our platforms, rather. So if you look at our radio coverage, which is unparalleled, which really offers every language in this country, it's going to play a very important role in election coverage, ensuring us that we're informing South Africans, we are educating South Africans, and also we are entertaining South Africans, which is going to come out of these elections. But I think what's important is that we also have the biggest newsroom in the country. I'm sitting here today with yourself in the studio, and these, so I believe that the elections, what it does for SABC is that it really shows South Africans the scale of SABC, and now we orchestrate our ecosystem to deliver to our public service mandate.
And someone then who has been seeing reports around the SABC has been listening then to our conversation talking about the financial sustainability of the organization and the challenges that it's currently going through. Do they have anything to worry about, that they could see maybe a more scaled back approach towards the election? Or are we, going to be able to deliver as wall to wall as we've done in the past?
We're not scaling back. I'm sure you said earlier on, in terms of my background is marketing. And this election is an opportunity for SABC to also show South Africans that we are very committed to South Africa's democracy. We do believe that we are part of the custodians of that democracy. So we are not scaling back. In fact, we are going to be scaling up. If you think about the fact that we've got the SABC Plus platform, now we are available on a multi-platform basis. So the OTT platform is going to play a massive role for us. It gives us scale, because now we are able to have pop-up channels that are just going to do election coverage, something we didn't have before, because we had only the TV channels and the radio. And what's going to be happening there is that we are going to be bringing in the youth, which is so critical. So we're going to be coming up with programming that looks at different segments of South Africa's audiences, that looks at their interests and ensures that we are really bringing in coverage that speaks to the kaleidoscope of South Africa's population.
And so then, when it comes to that, and I'm sure when we speak about our population, this conversation is always making us unpopular, because the collection of license television license
and I'm
fees,
smiling.
that is the one thing that the SABC is not able to get right. What do you do in order to be able to collect money from those who have TV licenses?
Yeah. So the reality is that if you look at the current funding framework of the SABC, 83% of our revenue comes from our commercial activities, meaning advertising, sponsorship revenue, etc. That's where that's where the heavy lifting takes place. And then 13% of our revenue actually comes from TV licenses, meaning we're only collecting up to 20% from eligible households that are supposed to be paying. And that's where the SABC bill becomes very critical, because it's imperative for us to find a viable funding model for the SABC. We know what the cost of the public mandate is. For next year, for example, this financial year we've just started, we're looking at 1.7 billion, of which 800 million is unfunded. So it just goes to show that it's so important that the solution for this funding model is agreed upon and implemented as soon as possible.
Can we be then, frank in this one? Because if we are to look at the mandate, if we are to look at the bill, if we are to look at our balance sheet, is the SABC able to then function without a bailout?
I think what's important is that we know that we have to be financially sustainable. So in our current budget, when I was talking about the loss for next year, it's a calculation that doesn't include a bailout. So we've managed to recover from the big hole of 1 billion rand plus last year to the 590 million without a bailout. So it just goes to show how we are optimizing, how we are looking at new revenue streams, etc. But it's important, what we are saying is that through our minister, and obviously to Treasury, we are saying that we'd like to go back and open up the discussions again. And we don't want to call it a bailout. What we are asking for is the funding of the public mandate. So we are actually not asking for a bailout.
So what then becomes, some of the challenges? Because you think about the fact that if you are not able to generate enough revenue, you will then be constrained, for example, when it comes to the content that you're able to curate as the SABC, particularly for some of the platforms, in order then to be competitive, possibly. So what would you say then have become some of the areas of great concern for you when it comes to this issue of being able to compete with some that you are competing with as the SABC then when it comes to funding?
So I'm one of those people who believes don't let a good crisis go to waste. And that's what we have at the moment. So yes, if you look at it from a traditional perspective, you look at it like that, to say we've got a challenge, etc. But there's an opportunity here. And one of the key things that we've done is leverage partnerships. So Centec is one of the key partnerships to us. But you've seen that we've got a partnership with Prime Media, where we struck a deal for content. And now we have some of the best, what they call the shiny floor content in the country that's come through SABC. We've just announced a partnership with the BBC. So what we are doing is that we are going to be forging partnerships with like-minded broadcasters, with like-minded producers, because I think one of the key things we're going to do is leverage our strengths. Because at the end of the day, we've got the scale, we've got the audiences, it is unrivaled, We tend to look on the negative side of it, but the reality is that what are advertisers buying? They're buying audiences. And it's time for SABC to take their rightful place, because we do have their audiences, whether it's, high value audiences or mass audiences, they all sit on SABC platforms. And that's what I was talking about when I was saying about the revenue streams. Because what this does is that it demands that we must think differently. It demands that we must look elsewhere for revenue. And therefore, we're coming up with some brilliant partnerships. For example, third-party funded content creation that we are looking at. And so we've become more bold, we've become more innovative, and we've recognized that we started at a point in time where we looked at, for example, the global OTT players that have come to South Africa, the likes of the Disney Pluses, the Netflixes, and we thought, they're eating our lunch, woe unto us. But how we're looking at it right now is that actually, let's compete. We know where the audiences are. We know these are multi-platform viewing audiences. We know that the mobile devices become ubiquitous. People are not coming back to just linear viewing. Yes, we still have audiences there, but we must go where audiences are, produce very brilliant content that is delivered wherever audiences are, from whatever platform that they want to consume them on. So that's the plan going forward.
So it sounds like a glass half full approach, and there have been reports that are suggesting we may be facing day zero then. I wonder then, listening to what you're saying, where do you then base those?
So day zero was a comment that was made when the new board arrived. So we are beyond day zero. We're not facing day zero. We are moving away from day zero. And
so it's not coming?
No, we are not facing day zero. We can't plan to fail. I think that's so important for us. And it's not just us, being glass half full. And as I said, we don't have a magic wand. But what we have is a solid strategy. And hence we're saying we need to ensure that we drive that cohesion at SABC, that the people of SABC unite behind that strategy and execute it. Because strategies by themselves don't work. What you need is the right human capital that's going to buy into that and be inspired to go and execute. And that's the most important part to actually achieving what we need to achieve. And
how do you get around that one? Because that's part, as you say, of a very critical aspect of it. But how do you get around it? Especially given the fact that, some would say we've seen strategies in the past, have had to implement strategies in the past or not implement strategies in the past, which sometimes others would say is why the SABC finds itself in this position. So how do you begin to turn around those particular mindsets in order to be able then to have the buy?
I think what's important is that we are bringing our employees into our confidence, and we are co-creating these plans with them. So yes, we've got a strategy, but the execution part is very critical. Therefore, that execution part, they play a very big role, because now they come in and realize, how does this impact me? And what's my role in ensuring that this is successful? Because this is about my future. It's about, my family. It's about the legacy that I want to leave. So that's what's important, is that we are having those conversations. As I sit here, we are going through what we call the implementation of the strategy, the socialization of the strategy. And we are sitting with all the teams at SABC, whether it's from sales, it's from the technology team, the media teams, the radio teams, etc. We are all sitting around the table and co-creating and having some very courageous conversations where there are no holy cows, and saying, how do we actually go north? Because we must all go north.
And before we go, there is, of course, a lot to be said about some of the headlines, the headline stories that the SABC has found itself in. One of them has been the executives that have been suspended. And, for you, it happens just as you come in. And I wonder, for you, firstly, how was that like? I mean, to walk in, here's a storm, and now you have to deal with it.
It's not something that I expected, but it's something that I had to face. And we have a very strong board. And our board chair and our board deputy chair were very instrumental in really helping to steady the ship. And therefore, I had to go back to them for guidance, to be able to understand, what was happening and the developments. And I think, obviously, I'm not able to talk to the merits of the suspensions, but I think what's important about this, from an EXCO perspective, there's a common understanding that we are in this boat together, and that as a whole, we have to make this work. We don't have plan B. I always say to them, yes, we have different scenarios, but in my mind, when I go to bed at night, there is only one plan. And that plan is to see SABC succeed and become financially sustainable for the future.
I know you can't get into the merits, but what can you tell us about the latest there with regards to these suspensions?
They are in progress. You know, the hearings are in progress. And as soon as those are finalized and the decisions are made, we will be able to articulate the outcome.
Someone who then says, I've seen everything. I've heard from you at the helm. I've heard from possibly the media reports and all of that. I'm still concerned about the SABC because we don't do this for ourselves. We don't do this for even the SABC. We do it for the public. And when they watch, they say, is it an organization that is, going over a cliff? Is it an organization in the next couple of years that will still be here serving the public? What do you say to someone who's losing confidence in the SABC?
I say to that person, I wake up every day and I know that there's more than 25 million South Africans who depend on the SABC for their information and their education. And that's what keeps us going. So the fact that we do have a large portion of our population that really still believes in the fact that we bring them that content that is relevant in their lives. If you look at the news that we bring that is fair, that is balanced, that is equitable, if you look at the fact that you've got a commitment from our minister in terms of ensuring that the SABC is sustainable, and I think that's what's important. There is a common understanding that the SABC is to succeed. And it's something that I have to point out. The SABC is critical in South Africa's creative arts industry. You cannot have the SABC fail because the failure of the SABC is dire. It is dire. It's something that when people talk about the SABC, sometimes we think about the buildings at Auckland Park. We don't realize that value chain that makes up the SABC. And therefore, it's imperative upon us to actually ensure that the SAB succeeds. So yes, and I do understand that there's probably somebody who said here before, who's told you their strategies, who said that this is going to work. But I think the difference is that what we are doing is that we are embracing the fact that the only thing that we know, the only thing that is certain is uncertainty. And COVID has shown us that. We've survived COVID as a country. Those were tough moments. And I do realize that change is hard. Even for myself in this transition period, change is very hard. And it's important then for all of us to understand that we need to walk this path together. Not just the people employed at SABC. Our partners are critical in this journey that we're going to be taking. These are the producers, the content providers, the other partners that we've got in our ecosystem. And as SABC, that we know that as a brand, the interesting part about it is that we are the most respected media brand in this country. And this is something that we don't talk about, and this is done by external research houses. We know that we deliver news that is fair, news that is equitable, news that is accurate. And we know that in the previous elections, Media Monitoring Africa has given that report to Parliament. So what I'm saying is that, yes, there's headlines, but one has to dig deeper and understand the fiber of this organization and the reason that we are still standing here today.
All right. Thank you for stopping by. Hopefully it's going to be on a regular basis. The viewers would like to hear on the developments, but do appreciate you coming through to our studios there. That is Nomsa Chabeli, our Group CEO. And we talk about, of course, a myriad of issues around the SABC, but I'm sure you've heard enough in order to be able to make up your own mind.